On today's episode of Dance Med Spotlight, I'm speaking with Alexandra Beller. She is the artistic director of her own company, faculty at the Laban Bartoneff Institute of Movement Studies, choreographer and director for theater, and an author of 2 upcoming books. We talk a bit about what is this concept of somatics, first and foremost, and then we explore a variety of other ideas, including the idea of the inner critic versus the inner witness, thinking about ideas of the benefits of mirrorless practice and mirrorless dance studios, and resilient bodies, sustainable practice, and this idea of the pushing through culture that we can see in dance. To learn more about these topics and more, make sure that you listen to the rest of the episode. Welcome back to another episode of Dance Med Spotlight, where we talk about all things dance medicine and dance science. Today, I am excited for my guest, Alexandra Beller. Welcome. So my very first question for everyone is, give us some brief background on who you are and what you do within the dance space.
And I wish it were brief. I'll make it as brief as I can. I started off as a dancer, professional dancer. Biggest part of my performance career was 7 years with Bill T. Jones. And then I really got the bug to create my own work. So I left the company and have had a dance theater company of my own. Ran that as a real performance company for 16 years. And then that slowly transitioned to be more of an education company. Somewhere along that route, when I was choreographing, I got an MFA and I got something called a CMA, so Certified Movement Analyst, which is a degree in Laban movement analysis and Bartoneff fundamentals. Bartoneff fundamentals is a practice of biomechanical efficiency and figuring out, I call it the user manual for the human body. That CMA allowed me to work with bodies in motion in a lot of other fields. So it was a very natural transition about 12 years ago to transition into theater. So I started choreographing a lot for theater. That, of course, brought me into directing for theater. It also brought me into a little bit of playwriting. And it also brought me into doing one-on-one work with not just dancers, but really anyone with a body who wants to be more efficient, who's facing any kind of friction in their momentum, in their ability. And that doesn't just mean physical, like people who hit life blocks, people who are dealing with a career change. I think all of that is negotiable through the body. I also did a lot of artistic mentorship and coaching choreographers in their work. All of that brought me to write 2 books, which are coming out in the next year. One of them is a book about Laban and Bartoneff for music conductors, because that's one of the populations that I have been able to bring that CMA information to. And one of them, which I've really been working on and off for 8 years, is a book about the creative process, which is meant to be a mentorship guide for choreographers and directors in particular, but I really feel like any artists and creatives can use it. It feels like maybe the artist's way got more specific and refined towards art making, and that's no shade on the artist's way. I think it's absolutely brilliant and was life-altering for a ton of people and the industry. And then that gets us all into our creative juiciness. This is for people who are already creatives, who are facing a little bit of friction in their process, stagnation, or just want another map, to add to all their maps. So that's been my focus recently. So right now, I'm on faculty at the Laban Bartoneff Institute. I teach at a lot of universities. I kind of come in and out as mostly a guest artist. Sometimes I'll, teach a graduate course for a semester. I run my company, which produces workshops that I teach and curate. I have a couple of regular classes in Bartoneff, and I've got private clients. And I take theater work when it comes, but it's been a bit dry lately. So that's my overview.
Yeah, and I love it because you've had an opportunity to see so many different sides of the industry and adjacent industry and all of that, to have a lot of different perspectives to draw from and be able to then share with people, which is amazing. And I think when we can have have a lot of different little areas that we can get involved in like that, it just makes it more robust when we are working with an individual on anything, to be able to draw from that experience. So I love that.
Thank you.
I think a good question to also ask early on in this conversation, for people who are not yet familiar with the concept of somatics, what is that?
Great question. Somatics is the way that we can affect the body with the mind and the mind with the body. It's really the map of the way our consciousness, perceived experience, and our functionality and controlled experience converse with each other. So, yes, I can look at my hand and say, I want to lift my hand. And of course, it's my brain at work, and my brain, stimulates my motor neurons, and then I lift my hand. And that's not somatic itself. But when I develop the awareness of how I'm communicating with my body, that suddenly is somatic. So even in the lifting my hand, I can feel the thought, and then I can feel the muscles contract, and I can feel my bicep pulling my lower arm up toward my face. And that sensing and tuning in to what exactly is happening in the body, the thing that's happening itself is not somatic. The awareness of what's happening is somatic. And of course, not everything in the body can be willfully affected by the mind. If I'm, you know, um, having a digestive problem, I can't like force something to happen in my intestines, right? From my mind, the way I can control my breathing with my mind, right? So
Yeah.
that's one of the easy somatic directions or maps to look at, is the breath. The breath is the only thing that connects the unconscious and the conscious mind, right? So it's obviously it's an autonomic function, thankfully, and we
Mhm.
do not have to think about our breath. Thankfully, we just breathe. And yet, as I'm sure everybody knows, you can control your breath. And
Yeah.
so that breath lives in a fluid line between the unconscious and the conscious mind. It's the only function in the body that is both autonomic and really controllable. And
Mhm.
that way that we control our breath, and everybody knows how to do this, take a breath in and just pause for a moment, and then take a breath out and pause for a moment. That moment and that consciousness of the breath, that's somatics. And we can do it with the skeleton, we can do it with muscles, with fascia, with breath. To some degree, we can feel into organ.
Mhm.
And certainly there are more and more granular levels, and different somatic practices function with different areas of the body more and more. Some are very skeletal, and
Mhm.
some go to more fluid systems. Craniosacral therapy works with cerebral spinal fluid, which is the juiciness around the spinal cord, right? And there's a pulse to it. And so in craniosacral therapy, a lot of what they're dealing with is feeling into that pulse and seeing if they can affect the nervous system through the architectural, physical spine, spinal cord, dura, cerebral spinal fluid, through manual
Mhm.
touch. So lots of different somatic practices have a different window they go through, but what they're trying to do is create deeper awareness between the person's conscious mind and their body, so that they have more sensation and control ultimately over how their body functions.
Mhm. I love that description, and I think it paints a good picture for some of the things that we're going to be talking about moving forward as well. So, the first thing that I want to bring up is a concept of sort of, as performers, we're always getting corrections, critiques, feedback, things like that. And it can make us very critical of ourselves. It can make us live in that space of looking for perfection and all of that. Talk to me a little bit about that and this idea of inner critic versus inner witness.
Such a great question. I mean, to back out of it for a moment, the first thing I'm going to say is that I do feel like we're in a generational shift around inclusivity and authenticity and respect and dismantling abusive practices in the dance field. And whenever possible, I hope that dancers will, before even doing any of this work on the inside, assess their situation. And if there's something that is abusive in their situation, do the work to get themselves out of it. Even, young dancers should be at least talking to their parents or talking to the school director, or, if there's somebody that's speaking to them in a way that is creating pain for them. I hope that even as a first step, before we get into and how can you affect your own experience of it, let's stop letting that happen. That being said, sometimes it's not abuse, it's just critique. It's, understandable, necessary, useful critique that we do need to improve. And I have one son who's extremely sensitive to criticism. I know that I'm not using an abusive tone. He still gets very hurt sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So then, yes, there are a lot of things that we can do on the inside to talk about our experience. But I just wanted to put that caveat out as if somebody's screaming at you in class, or, telling you that you're worthless, or telling you that you'll never make it, get out of there. That's the first step to protect yourself. Then if you're in an environment where it's doesn't seem like anybody else is talking about this doesn't seem to be from the outside, this seems to be the way I'm receiving this information, and also what my brain is doing with it. I'm starting to run with these ideas, or I'm making assumptions about what people think of me or how people feel about me. And those assumptions are negative. That's where my own work in my brain can come up. One thing that I heard from a somatic therapist that I really loved is that she named her inner critic. She named her Becky. And sometimes when her inner critic starts saying, you know that you're not as good as da-da-da, or you know that you'll never da-da-da-da, she goes, Becky, not right now. I just don't have time for this right now. And something about separating it with a name was really useful. So that's one tiny little thing that I have picked up that I loved. I really like encouraging people to develop a relationship with that voice. I think that it makes it less omniscient, there's a God voice in your head and that's right. And you listen to it or you don't listen to it, but it's, the voice is really correct. I like to have conversations and even interviews with my inner critic. So one thing is, I think it can be useful sometimes to let your inner critic take the microphone, not in public, but in a safe space, like the comfort of your home. Nobody's there listening to you. You've prepared yourself to hear this information. You are ready to stop this if it gets to be too much and you feel flooded, emotionally flooded. But what I do like to do sometimes is say, okay, go ahead. You've been talking to me all day. You want to say something? Here's the microphone. Say it out loud. And I give my inner critic my actual physical voice. And I say, go ahead, say it. And I talk to myself out loud in the safety of my home. This book is going to be a huge failure. Nobody wants this. Everyone thinks you don't have a PhD, and whatever it is, go ahead, say it. Say your worst. And I say it out loud. For one thing, just hearing it out loud sometimes allows me to hear how some of it is so ridiculous. Nobody cares if I have a PhD, if I write a great book. Who's caring about that? Nobody. And if anybody does, they're not my people, right? So sometimes it'll say something and, people are going to think this. And then when I hear it out loud, I'm like, well, anybody that would think that those aren't my people. So I don't care. So just the act of hearing it out loud can be healing.
Mhm.
Sometimes, though, then I'll have a conversation as if I'm sitting at lunch with, I don't know if I can call it a friend, but somebody who's saying these things to me. And and I'm in a really evolved, high place. I'm feeling grounded, and I'm going to have a kind of Socratic conversation with this person who's saying, you know, that this is going to be a huge failure, and you've wasted your time, and you've really gotten off path, whatever it is they're saying, right?
Mhm.
Imagining myself at lunch with this person, and I'm like, wow, you sound almost angry at me. Are you angry at me? And then I let them both talk. You can do it out loud, but you can also do it in your head. And, then my inner critic has to say, no, I'm not angry. I'm just thinking, whatever they say. And then I go into that. And I have to, of course, keep myself really cared for and grounded. I sometimes, will keep a hand on my chest, on my heart, and, or
Mhm.
I'll be, rocking a little bit while I'm doing it. I'm just doing things to comfort myself. If I notice that I'm getting too wound up by hearing these things, I'm going to pull the plug. I'm also the director of this situation, right? So I can
Mhm.
say, you know what? That's enough. I think you've said enough today. Becky, go
Yes.
away, right? But if I'm in a grounded place and I'm taking good care of myself, I'm not feeling emotionally flooded, I can continue into this conversation the way you might if you were, talking about politics with somebody and you're like, I'm not going to get riled up. We're on really different sides of this. I am trying to understand where your beliefs come from. They do feel activating to me because I believe in this and you're fighting for this. But instead of getting activated, I'm gonna really get curious and I think something's going on. There's some kind of fear you've got
Mhm.
that's making you feel like you want to do this, take human rights away from people instead of just arguing with you about the context of it. I'd like to try to get underneath this and figure out what's going on for you at a deep
Mhm.
level, at a personal level. And I can talk to my inner critic like that, and sometimes it'll get me down into the real feeling. I feel ashamed of something. I have some like really old sense of worthlessness inside me, and it's coming up through this thing. Oh, oh, well, let me take care of you in that way. That sounds really difficult. Let me give you some empathy. Let me meet you there the way you would if you were having this political discussion with somebody and they finally were like, I don't know, I feel like I'm not going to be a success in my life and I get really scared and then I worry that other people are going to, come, whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
I hate my marriage and I don't like this role that I've been put in as this like perfect woman. And then when I see people changing, genders, it makes me feel like maybe I had a choice that I didn't take. And I hate myself for, like you get to the bottom of a political argument, really get in there, you're in a place where you can actually connect with somebody and things can heal. And I
Mhm.
think the inner critic is a similar thing. It's like real stuff that got a little twisted up.
Mhm.
Twisted up and saying you're too big to be a dancer, or you don't have the flexibility, or you don't have something important to say. Nobody's going to care about you. The
Mhm.
deep thing underneath that is what needs to be fixed. It's not really the thought, it's the feeling, and it takes time and bravery to get down there.
Yeah. And I feel like that is such a skill to be able to develop. I know even for myself and in my own life, things that have come up or things that I have dealt with where, like for a while, many years ago, I was having these feelings of anxiety and panic attacks, and it would seem to come out of nowhere. And I wouldn't know what the triggers were. And, it would just hit me, and I didn't know what to do with it. And it took a lot of work and skill building to figure out, well, sometimes what I'm feeling is actually over caffeination. Sometimes what I'm feeling is related to some sort of grief in my life. Maybe it's, who knows what else. But it took, like you said, it takes time. It takes a lot of work. It takes some scary moments and being very real with yourself and that kind of thing. But man, that is so powerful when you can get down to the root of some of those things. So then when something does pop up, you kind of have a faster track of sorts to try to work through some of that rather than just feeling paralyzed by it when it comes up.
Yeah, and the ironic thing is that I think in those moments, especially around anxiety and panic, but also depression,
Mhm.
an overriding thing I think we feel is helplessness and a lack of control, right? I can't control my mind, I can't control my body. And then the thing that you get when you really get to the bottom and you see the map at the bottom of it is like you actually do get some control back because you can recognize, oh, I'm flooded right now. What just happened? And as you're talking about what you're describing is this beautiful somatic inquiry where you're like, okay, so my heart is racing. My breath feels really shallow and I'm feeling physical anxiety. I did have 3 cups of coffee.
Mhm.
That is something that caffeine does. So it is possible that this is mostly a caffeine reaction right now, even though I'm having an emotional reaction to it. Another time you're like, I'm checking in. Okay, my heart is racing. My breath is shallow. My skin feels hot. My shoulders feel tight. I have not had any caffeine today. Had a good night's sleep last night. But I do have a conversation coming up that I'm really scared of. And I
Mhm.
think okay, yeah, now, and you just start to follow the threads until you find something. And that thing often does give you more control. Like, oh,
Yes.
maybe I need to write about that conversation. Maybe I need to release a little bit of energy by shaking or running or bouncing or doing a little exercise. Maybe I need to calm myself down by breathing or meditating or finding some stillness. Maybe I need some oxytocin. So I'm going to go find somebody that I love and get a little contact and have a little snuggle or a little skin on skin,
Mhm.
et cetera. And like figuring out what heals you in a given moment is part of that somatic inquiry, right? And then that gives you control.
Mhm. Most definitely. One thing that comes to mind as you're talking about that too, and this sort of checking in with yourself, following some of those threads, maybe finding ways to find some release in some of that or comfort in some of that is also so as a physical therapist, I'm dealing with pain and all sorts of bodily symptoms for folks all the time. And sometimes pain can either be emphasized by some of these other things that are going on in our body. If we're feeling anxious, if we're feeling stressed, if we didn't sleep well, it could be from a physical thing as well. Sometimes we can feel physical pain because we are so tight and stressed and that sort of stuff. And so that can be part of the work that I do with a client in front of me or a patient in front of me is helping explore what from what you're experiencing right now truly is from you rolled your ankle and sprained it and you have a lot of other stress in your life and things and that's kind of, where it seems like it's all sitting
Yeah.
or, that kind of stuff. And so yeah, it's fascinating trying to whittle down and help someone explore that,
Yeah.
especially when they do actually have a physical ailment on top of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have had 2 hip replacements, and before my first hip replacement, I was in, excruciating pain, and walking upstairs was one of the worst, triggers for it, and I have a flight of stairs in my house between my main level and bedroom, so was commonly going up and down the stairs, and, had a kinda somatic revelation one night when I was headed up the stairs, and it was a pain, and I stopped, and I felt into it and I was like, "You know what? There is pain when I walk up the stairs. That's true. That's a reality. I'm bone on bone in that hip socket and there's gonna be pain, right?"
Mhm.
But I felt into it and I was like, "You know what? Actually, so much of the pain that I'm experiencing right now is my bracing against the pain. So there's all this fear of pain in my body, and I'm doing all this bracing because I know that that next step is gonna be painful, and I don't want it to be, and I'm actually creating a lot more pain in my whole body, my lower back, my pelvis, all the way up through my head, and I was getting migraines and grinding my
Mhm.
teeth, and I said, "Okay, what if I climb the stairs and I just live inside the amount of pain that it is?" And I say, "Yeah, each step is this much pain. That's a bummer right now. I do have a plan to fix it. That is what is right now. And let me just feel exactly how much pain it is to climb a step and accept it. And it doesn't mean accept it forever. As I said, I had a plan, I'm not like, oh, this is my life. That's what it is.
Mhm.
Right? But, knowing that this is temporary and saying, but this is what it is. And I just really slowly climbed the stairs. It was a very, probably most therapeutic staircase of my life. And I would take one step. There was only one side that caused a lot of pain. Once I let it be just the pain in my hip socket, it was
Mhm.
only one side. The other side had been causing pain when I would climb because I was so braced and grindy and gritty that sacrum was, that sacroiliac joint was not happy either.
Mhm.
Um, so it was just like I would step up with my affected leg and I'd be like, yeah, okay. That's how much pain that is. It's also tolerable. It's not nice, but that's how much pain it is. And I went slow enough that I could partner with the pain, that it wasn't this like, oh, it's the stabbing knife that just gets me every time I'm like, okay, well, let me go slower and use the banister a little bit more. If I lean a little bit more, but I go up quite slowly, which also meant that I had to accept a sense of myself as disabled. And
Mhm.
I hadn't been wanting to do that, so I was climbing stairs just as fast as I can always do it. I can climb stairs fast, nothing's gonna get me down, and, part of that is just that denial created the need for all this bracing because that's not what was true, right? And
Mhm.
if we are gonna accept what's true, it's almost always gonna change our timing, our pacing, our phrasing, right?
Yeah.
We generally need more time for things than we take, and it's not our fault. We're not inventing this. The world moves too fast for us. We have created a world and an environment. Maybe not everywhere on the planet have they done this. There are still people living more in tune with their evolution of the species. But at least for us in developed countries, we are not in tune with the species evolution. If you just look at something like jet lag, it's because we created something that our body is not yet evolved to adapt to, right? So,
Mhm.
we're in terms of evolution, we're still at horse and carriage, maybe car, right?
Mhm.
And take a car ride and you don't have jet lag because right, and then in if we survive the planet and our species can evolve, maybe in 1,000 or 5,000, 10,000 years we won't have jet lag anymore because we will have evolved, although maybe by then we'll have invented something else that we haven't evolved towards. But in general, the world that we've invented moves faster than our bodies want to move, make decisions faster, react faster.
Mhm.
And the lack of one definition of trauma that I really like is when something happens and you do not have the time to metabolize it. And when you don't have the time to metabolize it, it gets a little stuck in your
Mhm.
body the way if you didn't metabolize your food somehow and things got stuck, you would be uncomfortable. And over time, it would create um, some harm in your body, and eventually need intervention. And the same thing happens with emotional interactions. Something happens, it creates a little ouch. And if we take the time to deal with it and process it, that ouch goes away. If we don't, there's a little thorn somewhere, and your body, closes around it and seals it up and holds on to it, but it's in there. And, maybe that one little thing doesn't do anything over time, but 50 of them, 100 of them, repeated exposure to those thorns does create a system inside the body where there's danger in the body.
Mhm.
And then that danger, as you're talking about, can rear up unexpectedly as a panic attack, an anxiety attack, a depressive episode, or physical things. I totally believe in Western medicine. And I also do believe that some of our pain that is absolutely real pain, when people say psychosomatic, some people think, oh, you're saying I'm faking. Absolutely not. real, felt, experienced pain, just like if, you cut yourself and you had, pain from an open wound, muscular spasm that creates distortion in the skeleton that pulls on, all of those pathways that start to distort the body and put us into an uncomfortable situation, create real pain, but they can have emotional seeds.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, our bodies and minds are so incredibly complex, and how they interact with each other and build on things over time. And yeah, I feel like the more I learn about it, the more questions I end up having along the way. That's for sure. Even in my own life, much less working with other folks too. I want to change our path of topic a little bit and get into, so we had kind of started with this idea of what is somatics in the first place, and then this idea of the inner critic versus inner witness. Now I want to go to this idea of another way that we get feedback a lot of times in the dance world is looking into the wall of mirrors that exist in basically every studio all the time. I know one thing that you practice and follow is this idea of mirrorless practice or mirrorless studios. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I am adamant I never use a mirror in my classes. I really, even when I was teaching like full on advanced professional level dance classes, I didn't use mirrors. I don't think there's inherently something wrong with a mirror, but I think the proportion to which we use it means that we could never use it again and would be a positive thing, right? So if we used mirrors like, I don't know, I'm going to make up a number, 25% of the time for feedback, I think it would be fine. The fact that we often educate our young dancers using mirrors 100% of the time means that at a certain point we could let's never use them again, because now they've become this really dysfunctional relationship in which I'm trying to get what should be inner information from the outside. So if all of your information about yourself came from somebody else, so you went to the doctor and the doctor didn't ask you any questions about how you were feeling, didn't ask you any of your symptoms, really didn't let you speak at all. You walked into the doctor and they just said, well, step on the scale, let me take your temperature, I'm going to look at you. Okay, this is what I think is going on with you. The possibility that they would be accurate is extremely low, right? They absolutely need you to say, okay, so I've been waking up in the morning and I've been feeling this. And then around midday, I noticed this. I've been eating this. That's the information that they need. A good doctor is going to prioritize that information and not jump to conclusions and not just tell you, well, the tests say this, and so this is what it is, right? Even medical tests are to some degree from the inside. It's your blood, it's your temperature, it's your, right? So even some of that data really is an inner voice speaking, even if it's not your conscious voice speaking, right? It's your blood speaking, or your, cerebral spinal fluid speaking in a lumbar puncture, right? So that is still inner information. If we turn that back to the mirror, and the mirror is the doctor, right? Now, we can use a mirror in a healthy way if we really have something for which a mirror is highly functional. Like, I'm trying to figure out if I'm shifting more to one side when I, extend this leg, or, do a tendu, than I am on the other, because I'm noticing that I feel like more grip on one side when I'm stabilizing on that side and I extend the other leg. I'm really gripping on one leg, and on the other leg it feels really easy, and I'd like to look in the mirror to see if I'm weight shifting the same amount on both sides. That's a really healthy use of a mirror. Nothing wrong with it. The reason that I believe in mirrorless classes is because I think we've lost the ability to speak for ourselves. Like, we've lost a lot of the ability to say, well, could I figure out whether I'm weight shifting more to one side than the other without the mirror? What does this feel like when I'm oh yeah, I kind of get to this. Yeah. Well, oh, my hip hurts a little bit and I've been like you start to unpack it somatically. That information is often more accurate than something we're going to see in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
I also feel like the mirror brings in all kinds of other stuff that is distracting and not useful, including stuff about aesthetics or, our size or how we look or how we compare to other people or, so if you're having any kind of body image feelings that don't feel happy, I don't like something on my body, looking in the mirror is going to bring those thoughts to surface. And those thoughts are, when you're trying to figure out whether you're weight shifting efficiently, thinking about whether you have a pimple on your face or you like your hair or your, arms look too flabby, that doesn't help, right? So now I've
Mm-hmm.
lost the track. Now I'm in some kind of negative spiral. Even if you have a really generous, loving, positive body image, self-image, which, is very rare. But even if you have that, I still feel that we over prioritize this act of looking in the mirror. And even for somebody who has a really loving self-image, it still can be distracting to look at yourself because you're like, you are looking at your pelvis, but you're also like, oh, look at my this. Even if it's an appreciation, it's still not what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. Or you see somebody back there doing something.
Right. Yeah.
Hmm,
And so in general, it's not that, I want to ban all mirrors from the planet forever. Although, like, what would happen if we did? You know?
that's a whole nother discussion.
um, but, I do think that even for kids, maybe especially for kids, like teaching them to learn to do these things without that visual feedback and just do it with inner feedback. Like, okay, well, I'm talking about weight shift. I can feel that. My
Mm-hmm.
vestibular system, my proprioception, my interoception, all of those are activated. Those are all relationships. When you're talking about your long journey to go inside and figure out what was happening with those panic attacks and anxiety attacks, and is it caffeine or is it emotional, or that's the work that we do when we're not getting that visual feedback,
Mm-hmm.
is doing that inner awareness work. Those relationships to vestibular, proprioceptive, and interoceptive systems, which is just how we feel the inside of our body and in relation to space and balance. Those systems, they are there, but the awareness of them is not just automatically there. They require practice, just like any
Mm-hmm.
relationship. You don't sit down with a stranger and say, oh, I know you. Yeah, we know each other. Like we totally get each other, right? It takes a lot of conversation. And we
Mm-hmm.
have conversation with our balance. And that's what, it's not just brute strength that helps us become a quote unquote good balancer. It's really getting to know our vestibular system, our weight shift, our equilibrium. And then sometimes we can start to feel those deeper reflexes that are all baked into our brain, but they're less conscious now. When we were really little and we were learning to walk, those equilibrium responses, writing reflexes were very present, right? And they were what kept us alive, right? Because babies don't have like abs to,
Mhm.
and cross lateral connectivity to keep us, integrated, right? So their oversized head falls off their stack and they fall right over, and they're learning that so that they can learn to walk and not fall because their survival is at stake. Then
Mhm.
those reflexes become much more baked into the brain, and we don't have so much consciousness of them, but we can regain quite a bit of consciousness of our reflexes if we converse with something like our weight vestibular system. And what I
Mhm.
mean by converse is like listening to it at a pretty granular level, which again means slowing down. I think if
Yes.
there's a theme today, it's slow down.
Yes. Two things come to mind as you're talking about that. First is, again, working with some of the younger dancers that I work with as a physical therapist. Sometimes I'm also working on performance as well as rehab stuff. And, are there things where maybe having more strength here or more proprioception awareness or whatever to improve some of their technique and movement in general? And one of the ones that I love working on is turns, thinking a pirouette. A lot of times, some of the younger dancers, they look like they are in a pretty good position, and then they just fling themselves into a turn and hope for the best and see what happens. And they're like, yeah, I really want to get better at my turns, but I don't know. And so there's so much of, okay, take a moment. Are you stacked? Do you feel control? Are your ribs stacked on top of torso and pelvis? And, working through all of those different pieces, and then have them in a controlled manner go through their pirouette, and they go, that was so much better. I'm like, yeah, because we stacked things the way that they're supposed to and allowed the body to work in the way that it's built rather than just flinging ourselves and hoping for the best. So that's one of the ways that I sometimes see it manifest with the young dancers that I work with, for example. Another thing that came to mind is also thinking about older adults and this idea of falls and balance, and where it has become a belief in society that it is normal for older adults to fall. It may be typical, it may be common that older adults fall, but it should not be normal or expected that an older adult will fall. And one of the things I always go back to in my own brain is exactly what you were talking about. As babies, as young children, we're doing a lot of things to kind of train our systems. As we get older, we're probably, most of us, not trying to climb a tree anymore, or trying to dig a tunnel in the snow outside, or things like that, where we're testing those boundaries and kind of reminding those systems of what it could be doing. And so it also makes it, as we get older, where those systems just haven't had the practice.
Yeah, we atrophy. And this is true. And this is something I talk about in terms of creativity, very different topic, but similar architecture in that, basically you've got every possible choice available to you, right? Every possible physical choice, every direction in space, every quality. And then, we develop patterns and habits. We have to, and that starts to shape our choices. So like, I tend to favor this direction or this side or this quality. Or in this situation, I tend to do this, right? So we start to cut off certain choices. That's natural and it's necessary. Otherwise, we would be frozen in space. I could do absolutely anything, anywhere, all the time. I can't choose, right? So we have to narrow our choices to really become. That is how our vocal dynamics develop. That's how our personality develops, right? We start to, I'm this very strident person, or I'm this very like sensitive, soft person. And, we start to cut off certain choices. But the way that we develop in adulthood rarely reopens and reanimates choice. And this is true of our creativity, but it's also true of our physicality. Once we get to what I'm gonna call, and I don't mean this in a like capitalistic way, but like kind of peak performance, right? Like our body has really learned to function very well. We're walking, we're running, we're climbing. If those things are available to us, we're doing those things. If those are not available to us, we're functioning at the peak of our ability, right? If you're a wheelchair user, you're functioning at the peak of your ability in your chair. So you're functioning at your personal peak. And then rarely do we continue to say, oh, I could also do this. I could also, oh, I never do this. And so there's nothing wrong with habit. And of course, habit has a shadow side. And the shadow side is that habit creates a baseline. And from there, then we tend to home in more. And that shaves off a couple choices. That's fine. This is what I want. Then we get another habit and that shaves off, two more choices. And that makes it smaller until our available choices are so small and the other ones have atrophied so much that suddenly we feel stuck. And that stuckness is like for an older person, I can't really bend down and stand up. I don't like getting up and down from a chair. I can't climb stairs. I can't pick something up off the ground because I've stopped doing flexion in my, hip, knee, and ankle at that level. And so novelty and so newness in the body, but also in the mind, is essential for longevity. And so anything that brings some newness into the body, physical practices, um, intellectual practices, etc., like anything that brings newness in the body is going to support longevity.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I think this creates a really good transition opportunity to yet another topic. This idea of resiliency of our bodies and sustainability in our bodies. And I think with what we were just talking about, those are some hints of ways that maybe we promote those ideas. But I also want to compare that against what we sometimes see in dance culture of this idea of pushing through. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. I actually just wrote an article about this for Dance Research Journal about how we've lost the value of joy and rest as central values, not as byproducts, not as things we need to earn,
Mhm.
but as essential, valuable places that we can honor. And that as a culture, dance culture, this is something that needs to change, the way that, you want fame, well, fame costs. And right here is where you start paying in sweat. It's not that there's not going to be sweat, but it's not a payment. And the thing that you buy with your payment is your rest.
Mhm.
That's not true. That's a myth that we have to actively work to dismantle, the way we're actively working to dismantle racism and the patriarchy and these things that we look at and we say, that's not healthy. That's not going to create more happiness, more openness, more safety in the world. We need to take those things apart. And we need to look at all the places where those things are embedded in the system. And we need to shine light on them and pull those weeds out.
Mhm.
So in the dance world, this idea that there's a few ideas. One, if you're in pain, it means you're good, you're doing it right, you're a good dancer, you're working hard, you're the good one, right? Pain is no pain, no gain. That's absolutely not true. Uh, I would say, is there going to be hard work and sometimes like a sense of discomfort as we're growing and shifting and gaining as performers, as physical creatures? Absolutely. Pain is a different word, struggle, challenge, work, effort. Absolutely. And I don't want to swing the pendulum so far the other way that dancers are like, oh, well, that hurts this and that hurts that. And okay, let's be judicious with the word hurts. Let's talk about what's happening. And maybe it's like, oh yeah, you got really bony, back of your pelvis is really bony. So it hurts to lie. It actually does hurt. So let's put a mat underneath you. Okay, that's fine. That doesn't mean don't do it, right? It means like, okay, that is one thing that needs to be solved. Are your quads really sore after you've done a bunch of squats? Yeah, in a pretty positive way. That's a growth curve. That's fine. Pain is a different situation, and psychic pain, physical pain, those are not badges of honor. Those are
Mhm.
signs that something has gone off in your ecosystem and needs
Mhm.
attention. And the attention is not, stop, don't do that, never do that. That's not necessarily the answer. I mean, obviously, it depends on what the pain is and where. But in general, I think we have this, it's one of the binaries that we need to dismantle is it's either you feel amazing, perfect, wonderful, or you're in pain, grief, agony. And there's obviously a huge spectrum in between. So valuing rest, and this is not an easy thing, truly learning to value rest as a tenet, the way that we value rigor and work. And I'm not saying don't value rigor and work, but side by side with rigor, work, is rest. And I almost said rigor, work, integrity, as if integrity and, as if integrity was aligned with rigor and work and not with rest. And that's me needing to unravel it. As I was about to say it, I was like, integrity doesn't go to one side or the other. Integrity and work, integrity and rest,
Yes.
integrity and pleasure, integrity
Mhm.
and joy also go together just as much. And I can feel in my own body as I was saying it, for me, it still doesn't feel equal. There's still work to do inside my system. And sometimes I will say, you know what, I'm saying no to that, or I'm canceling something. Oh, I can't do
Mhm.
it. I can't do it. And why can't I do it? And this is just like that other conversation we were having with ourselves before. Why am I so resistant to canceling something? Well, I'm going to disappoint people. Okay, then what's going to happen? They're going to think that I'm not worth sticking around for. Or they're going to think that I don't have what it takes, or they're going to think I'm weak. Okay, what happens if they think you're weak? Um, um, I don't know. What happens if they think well, that's kind of a judgy thing for them to think. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
not weak. I just need rest. Who are they to tell me that I'm weak? I don't want to, and then you can start to pull apart the mythology a little bit inside your own brain and body. And I do think that it takes enormous work, and it's work that is ongoing for me as well, to say rest, true recovery, pleasure, joy are just as valuable as and have just as much integrity as rigor, challenge, determination, strength, resilience. I have survived a lot in my life, physically and emotionally, but I don't want that to be the thing that I'm proud of. I'm glad
Yes.
I did it. I am happy for myself that I had those things and I got to, get over things or move beyond things. But I don't think that that's what makes me special. I don't think that it certainly doesn't make me better than anyone. I mostly wish I hadn't had so many things that I had to overcome. I'm glad that I did. And I'm happy that I did, but I'm not like proud of myself for it.
Mhm.
I am proud of myself when I'm able to say, actually, no, I can't do that thing, or I'm not going to show up for that thing. That's actually these days when I'm proud of myself. It's not when I overcome something, it's when I say no to a situation in which I'm going to have to overcome something.
Yeah. Yeah, you've stood by a boundary. You've embraced that side. I love that. It makes me think about, again, with dancers, I hear this frequently because we're going through a rehab process after injury or pain. I have a competition, I have a show, I have a fill in the blank here. If I take that time off, I'm going to be letting my team down. My teacher's going to be mad at me. They're going to have to do X, Y, and Z because I'm not there. And, I'm making the recommendation because I am concerned for their safety and their health and their well-being, not only here and now, but moving forward. And if it's a young dancer wanting to make a career out of this is looking at that longevity for them and giving them the opportunity to pursue the things that they want to do and not be stopped earlier because their body has said enough because you have pushed too much. And that is always such a challenging conversation and challenging thing for them to face. And sometimes I get to know these dancers well enough that we can kind of start working through it a little bit together of, yes, your teacher, the choreographer, may be frustrated that they have to restage something, or yes, teammates will need to do some work to figure out, okay, now I need to be in a different spot. But that is their job, and your job is to take care of yourself and
Yes.
put your health first and
Yeah.
all of that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. And there are so many parts inside that are really critical. One of them, as you're saying, is just this separation of like, my life is not for other people. My life is for me. It's a very painful moment, and I've been in it, and I mean, I had a performance one night of my own choreography, and as part of a group show. Um, and I woke up in the morning and my hip was just like, it wasn't right. Like I couldn't stand on my leg. I could like super grip my glutes and abdominals and psoas on that side and sort of like lock my leg and step over it. But that's the only way that I could put weight on that side. My thigh bone was like not quite, my psoas was in such spasm, my thigh bone wasn't quite like sinking into the socket. And I like couldn't stand on my leg. Normal person with a normal psyche wakes up that morning and is like, oh, I can't teach my class that I'm scheduled to teach, and I'm going to have to cancel this show, unfortunately. Right? No, I got my husband to drive me to the studio where I was supposed to teach my class. I walked up the stair with one leg. I'm thinking I'm going to teach a 2-hour advanced technique class to professional dancers like this. I got in there, I got almost to class, and I was like, dissolved into a puddle of tears and was like, I can't do it. Did I cancel the show? No. I called my partner and was like, we need to rehearse because we need to re-choreograph some things because I am, struggling. And we went, and I, was like, I'm trying to choreograph around not being able to use a whole half of my body. And we come up with a version of it. And then I go to an osteopath to try to get some work done on it before the show. And she's like, you have a slight dislocation of your thigh bone. Like it's not quite in the socket, and it's like in danger of fully dislocating. And I'm putting you on crutches, and you need to go immediately home. And I was like, I will take the crutches, but I'm going to go to the show. And, we worked out this version.
Right.
And my partner in that show was also okay with this. She wasn't saying, Alexandra, this is ridiculous. It, ultimately was my husband who'd been saying it the whole day. Of course, he's like, I'm not driving you to your down. You have to cancel everything. Like, look at you, you can't walk.
Right.
And I was like, no, I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. And, eventually he was like, this is insane. You can't walk. You have to stop. And I canceled the show, and I went home, and I just felt so useless and so hopeless and so worthless because I wasn't doing the thing that I was supposed to do. And I had a major identity crisis. And inside that identity crisis, it was a really powerful moment where I was like, you just backed out of, one piece in a group show in a small theater on a Wednesday night in New York City because you can't walk. What is happening right now? And I had to really process how much of my identity and value is tied up in what I produced and what I made and how I showed up and what I gave and how much I didn't disappoint. And I had to look at it and say, like, are you valuable just sitting here on the couch, barely able to walk? Are you valuable right now? And I had to acknowledge the fact that I felt like, no, I don't feel that. And that was work I had to do over the next couple decades of my life. And at this point, it's not that it's not still hard, and I sometimes
Right.
canceled things, and I still have this feeling of like, oh, I'm losing my value when I'm not showing up for somebody or somebody's disappointed in me. That's my work to do. That's the people pleaser work to do, to say, I am valuable sitting here in my sweatpants, eating a frozen yogurt on the couch with my leg propped up in a heating pad behind my back and ordering in takeout for my kids. Like, I am valuable right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I just want to sit in that because that is just so beautiful, first of all. And I think it's something that is another one of those all too common things that comes up in the performing world where we feel like so much Whether it's, again, feedback from the outside world, we owe something to other people. And to a degree, we have responsibilities and that sort of stuff. And we also have responsibilities to ourselves. And like you said, it's not that it isn't hard, but maybe we at least have things that we've identified before, and we can go, okay, I think this is that same Becky, that inner voice popping up that I need to have a little chat with.
Oh, Becky.
Or, yes, good old Becky. Or, who knows what it might be, but at least having some things identified, having some skills that you've been working on over time to try to make the process a little easier, a
Yeah.
little more comfortable. Not that it's ever going to be like, oh, piece of cake, but we can make it a little bit better.
And of course, it's an ecosystem. So I do notice with like a generation of dancers that I'm teaching sometimes in higher ed who went through COVID at a very particular time. Sometimes some of them have swung the pendulum a little far, in my opinion, in the other direction of like, oh, this makes me uncomfortable, so I'm not going to do that. Or, oh, I just don't want to, so I'm not going to show up, and I'm going to let all these people that I've practiced with down. Nothing big is going on, but I'm just feeling a little bit of friction in my body. And, we also need to be considering the ecosystem. So what that means in what we were just talking about is that the community, the group, the team, the teacher are not more important than my future, my longevity, my health, my mental health, my well-being. You look at somebody like Naomi Osaka, who pulled out of, I think, the US Open, or Simone Biles, who pulled out of the Olympics at a moment when she was like, nope, I have to protect my mental health. And I so support that. And I love that those women are doing, making those choices loud and proud and visible. Totally believe that. And then, of course, we don't want our needs to completely usurp any sense of the ecosystem. Like, yeah, I don't want to go to work today, but I can. I'm okay. I can pull through. My students are all showing up. They probably didn't want to get up either. I'm not going to just not show up to that class. There's nothing deeply wrong. I'm just not feeling amazing, but I'm going to push through today. I'm going to apply some of my resilience that I'm not proud of, but I am happy that I have, and I'm going to, show up for people because it's important. It's a big moment. And I'm also not going to throw myself under the bus. I'm not going to sacrifice my future. I'm not going to sacrifice my, my body, my joints, my tendons and ligaments because, I need to show up for cheer practice today and I've got a torn hamstring.
Right. Yes. I think this is a good opportunity for a special segment on the show. On every episode of Dance Med Spotlight, we have the final bow, which is our take-home message. We've talked about a lot of things, a lot of interesting concepts and things where, maybe a listener doesn't have some of the concept or, the words that we've been using for some of this. If people were to walk away with one or two pieces of information, having listened to this whole episode or watched the whole episode, what do you hope that they walk away with?
The information that you receive from the inside of your body is more important than any of the information that's going to come to you from the outside of your body, whether that's from a teacher or the mirror or a dance critic, reviewer. And listening to that information takes more time than we usually give it. So slowing down in order to develop a really generous, loving relationship with the information from the inside of your body takes more time, and we need to slow down to be able to hear it. And hearing that information is going to change everything moving forward.
Beautiful. Last and certainly not least, we have the shameless plug. So this is your opportunity to promote anything that you have going on, any organization that you want to shout out. The floor is yours.
Well, I have a lot of content online. I've got a lot of digital courses, and I also teach live workshops. So my website is a really up-to-date hub for everything, and that's Alexandra Beller Dances, DANCES.org. If you just Google my name, Alexandra Beller, it'll come up. I've got a couple books coming out, but they will also be on the website. So pretty much my website is like a very well organized hub for everything that I offer. I've got live classes, digital classes, asynchronous courses in Laban and Bartenieff, all kinds of goodies available on that website, including a lot of free stuff and free classes that people can download and have a taste of what is Laban or what is Bartenieff. So I would say that's the plug.
Yes, wonderful. Well, Alexandra, thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure getting to speak with you.
Huge pleasure. Thank you so much.
Dance Med Spotlight is hosted and produced by Alyssa Arms. We discuss all things dance medicine. This has been another episode from Dance Med Spotlight. The Dance Med Spotlight is intended for educational purposes only. No clinical decision-making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can be present.